Okay. So I'm going to be talking just a bit of an introduction to why we started this RTMS journey in 2003 and the impact that it can potentially have on particularly heavy vehicle transport. This presentation is essentially about safety and sustainability. The CEO already mentioned the importance of safety with Exoro, and one of the key focus areas of the RTMS is safety. However, it actually originally started as a sustainability project in terms of protecting the road network. So originally the focus was on reducing overloading of heavy vehicles. But what we've also found in terms of sustainability is that we have a lot of small operators, emerging operators that are in the business of freight transport, and often the smaller companies don't implement basic fleet principles. But that's not just limited to small companies. However, if you start off a company with a few trucks and you don't have these basics in place, the risk of going out of business in the next 3 to 5 years is very high. So we found that the RTMS has been a good framework for any transport company to get the basics right, and therefore to promote sustainability. So really, when you see these case studies today, and then the presentation by Oliver, which goes into more detail about the requirements of the standard, you'll see it's about managing risk, it's about promoting compliance with the Road Traffic Act, but it's also very importantly about increasing productivity, and this will come out in the case studies. So from an economic point of view and from a safety point of view, a high standard of road infrastructure is very important for any country, and we actually have a very high standard of road infrastructure in South Africa compared with many countries throughout the world. In particular, our primary road network, which carries the bulk of heavy vehicle freight transport, is of a very high standard. 2 weeks ago, we had Les Bruiser from the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator in Australia out, and we presented 2 smart truck courses. And I drove with Les from Pretoria down to Pietermaritzburg and back, and he was very complimentary of the standard of our national roads. However, when we look at some of the other things on that list, like incidents and crashes, breakdowns, compliance with traffic regulation, safety and security, we fall very far short of international norms. So our crash rates and our fatalities on our roads is very, very high, unacceptably high, and in my opinion, it is a national crisis. The fatalities and serious injuries on our road is a national crisis. So we really need to think seriously about addressing this. So just a little video showing how quickly a crash can occur. Both of these clips are related to tires bursting. And I think what's hopefully will come through in this presentation is it's about safety, but it's also about the efficiency of the network, which gets seriously affected by crashes. And if you listen to the radio, I think even today there was a truck crash at Fountain Circle in Pretoria. Our road network, as I mentioned, our primary road network is in a very good state, so you can drive from any of the major cities from one to the other and you'll seldom or if ever see a pothole. SANROL has got a very high standard in terms of dealing with potholes on the SANROL network, which is about 25,000 kilometers. However, we have seen some serious deterioration of some of our secondary roads and local municipality roads, like these photos taken in Mpumalanga. And this has a very significant impact on, it has a negative impact on safety, but in particular on transport operating costs, or vehicle operating costs. And this was some work done with some imperial fleets where the actual actual recorded maintenance and repair costs on good roads was about R1 a kilometre. This is a few years ago, and it goes up by about 120% if those same trucks have to drive on a bad roads. So from an economic and global competitiveness point of view, it's absolutely essential that we have good roads. And these costs here exclude increased fuel consumption, increased travel times, and possible damage to goods. Jaap Berger will be giving a ZZ2 case study, and they have done a lot of work on monitoring the impact of the roads on the transport of tomatoes, which is their major product. Vehicles, we have some serious challenges regarding vehicles, and some of you are probably aware of the Brake and Tyre Watch initiative that's run by Fleet Watch magazine, and I've been involved in quite a number of them through the South African Road Federation, who is one of the partners, and to date there have been 45 Brake and Tyre Watch events. It's a 2-day training course for traffic officers to promote a better understanding of compliance of brakes and tyres, or non-compliance of brakes and tyres of heavy vehicles. And that's a list of some of them, not all of them. We had the first Brake and Tyre Watch in Namibia earlier this year. But on the first day of the training course is theoretical lectures in a room like this, and then on the second day it's practical out to a vehicle testing centre. Trucks are pulled off and inspected. And of the 757, what percentage, those of you who don't know the answer, who would guess what percentage of trucks were discontinued from use in all these training events? 10, 90, okay, two different extremes. But somewhere in between, about 69% of all the vehicles that were inspected were discontinued from use. And if you look at some of the defects, it's really scary. So you've got brake linings on the left there that should be in touching the drum, and on the right you can see gaps, big gaps, or in some cases the lining is gone, or even the brake shoe has been removed. And there's some results from a roller brake tester where you can see there's braking on the left or the right wheel, and on the other wheel there's no braking. This is very, very common. That maybe looks like a normal, nothing wrong with that photo, but in fact the brake booster has been removed completely. So that the wheel on the right has not got any brakes at all. However, there is some excellence. In Johannesburg, they're doing some quite serious brake testing, so it's not all bad news. Wheel nuts, missing wheel nuts is very common. And tires. Tires is probably the most critical component of a truck, because that's the interface between that load and the road. And we just see so many examples of tires that are completely unacceptable. Load securement is also something that's often not done properly. I hope none of them are your trucks. Okay, the guys at the back took a while to. But this shows fatal crash rates per 100 million kilometers, heavy vehicle fatal crash rates. This was a project I was involved in a while ago, 2010, moving freight with better trucks. A number of countries were involved in the study, and South Africa's fatal crash rate stood out. That's the line at the top, at about 10 per 100 million kilometers. So you can see we're way out of line with international practice. And I think one of the points is that these types of crashes, where you get long hours, many hours of lane closures, has a very negative impact on transport efficiency. So this is Town Hill in Pietermaritzburg on the N3, and in this case there are quite a number of instances of breakdowns or crashes where lanes are closed, the trucks stand, the light motor vehicles are diverted onto the other route. onto the R103, and this is just not good for the economy. If it happens once a month, maybe it's acceptable, but it's happening literally on a weekly basis. So I've just touched on some of the challenges in freight transport on the roads. We'll be talking a little bit more about driver fitness, reckless driver behavior, and the impact that it has. Bribery and corruption is a serious, serious problem in South Africa, and in particular on the roads. And really what it does is it perpetuates bad driving behavior, or overloading, or speeding, or whatever the non-compliance might be. It means that certain transport operators build a practice and have a practice or policy in their business, and it just means that those unroadworthy trucks continue to be on the roads without stopping that behavior. And the result of these inputs is poor road safety, high cost of transport, deterioration of the infrastructure, and high levels of emissions. So the National Overload Control Strategy was carried out in 2002, 2003 by the CSIR for the National Department of Transport. And besides the sort of traditional approaches to try and improve overload control, which you can see on this slide, in the middle there's a block there that says self-regulation. And this was as a result of attending some international conferences on heavy vehicles and recommending that maybe we need to look at self-regulation or promoting self-regulation to try and complement law enforcement, because law enforcement was obviously not being successful or effective. And we also there put in the performance-based standards approach, which I'll be talking about a bit later. So this all started as a recommendation of a national overload control strategy in 2002. A significant input was the Australian National Heavy Vehicle Accreditation Scheme, which was used as a basis to develop a South African standard. Originally it was ARP 067 in 2007, and then it was published in 2014, SANS 3095, and that's the standard that Oliver will be going into more detail. It was recently, earlier this year, it was a second edition was published, and that was the one which now incorporates consignees and consignors into one standard. Before there were three parts. The first one was for transport operators, and then one for consignees and one for consignors. So the accreditation that Exoro was handed over now, the certificate, was based on the new standard, which is 2019. So I think that the RTMS is a management system standard. It's industry-led, government-supported, it's voluntary, although some consignors can require it. If you want to do work for them, it could be a prerequisite. But it's focusing on consignors, consignees, and transport operators to implement a management system standards with those outcomes which are in green. So we want to protect the road infrastructure, which, as I said earlier, is critical if you want to operate an efficient and profitable transport business, improving road safety and increasing productivity. South Africa's logistics costs are very high compared to a lot of other countries. A lot of it is to do with where our industries and our mines are, a long way from the coast. We don't have big rivers that a lot of other countries have, so they can transport bulk goods on canals or rivers with barges. We don't have that, so we either have to transport our goods by rail or by road. And as you know, rail the efficiency and effectiveness of rail has declined quite considerably. So I'm sure most of you know what the board looks like. So the management system standard is SANS 3095, but we also have an accreditation scheme which is done through SANAS, and that's the board that an operator can put on the front of their truck once they meet the certification requirements. Oliver will go into this in a lot more detail in the next presentation, but there are basically four main pillars which are covered in 13 elements in the standard. And it's all about having a policy in your business, implementing it, keeping records, so that when your annual audit is done, the auditor can satisfy himself that you are actually implementing the requirements of the standard. But then there's the very important element of continual improvement. So wherever you are, in whatever KPI that you're looking at, it could be overloading, it could be speeding, it could be driver training, your objective is to improve. The membership of the RTMS has grown quite significantly over the last 10 years. Currently there are around 300 fleets that are certified, representing about 18,000 trucks and buses, and I think, I can't remember what the figure is, I think Adrian's got it, about 23 or 24,000 trailers, or somewhere around there.
Yeah, I'll show you the numbers later.
So the big impact, surprisingly enough, although the standard started out with an objective of protecting the road infrastructure, is a key element of road freight transport. Based on case studies, and you'll see it probably today with most of the case studies, that the positive impacts of the standard have been on vehicle maintenance, particularly trailers, and most importantly on drivers. So by paying more attention to driver training, driver health, and managing fatigue, there have been very positive spin-offs. So that includes reduction in breakdowns, reduction in fines, reduction in absenteeism, and very importantly, a reduction in fuel consumption as a result of better driver training. The support from the Department of Transport and government has been good over the years. Unfortunately, we did invite people from National DOT to the workshop today, but unfortunately we didn't have anyone coming. But you can see in this fourth pillar of the road freight strategy reference to self-regulation and road safety. So this was one of the previous workshops we had up in Polokwane. That is the previous Deputy Minister of Transport handing over a certificate. This was a function down in Nelspruit for Buscorp, and the previous Minister of Transport was present as well as the MEC. And then we had a function a few years ago when Golden Arrow Bus Services achieved their certification down in Cape Town, and also the previous Minister of Transport and the MEC. I just want to end off with a few references to some case studies. In this case, it's reference to the forestry industry, which was where this RTMS started. And when we started with the baseline in 2003, over 30% of the timber trucks were overloaded. That's now measuring the trucks when they deliver their timber to the mills. So we're getting more or less 100% sample. And this is pulp and paper in KwaZulu-Natal and in Mpumalanga. And what you can see from that graph is from about beginning of 2015, for the last 4 years, almost 5 years, the overloading has been hovering between 1 and 2%. So from over 30%, it's consistently now been reduced. And this is measuring between 20 and 28,000 trips a month. So it's quite a big sample. And then there's been a similar trend in the sugar industry in those same two provinces, where for the last 4 years, the overloading has been less than 1%. And that red solid line shows you the average payload, which initially it dropped a bit, because now remember they're reducing overloading significantly, but just through proper payload management, the average payload has actually increased to around about 26 tons. This is a City of Cape Town. They're the only government fleet that are certified, although there's one of their sister divisions, it's, what's it, Oliver? Stormwater. Water and sanitation recently got certification as well. So they're actually two government fleets, but they're both part of the City of Cape Town. You'll see there that their fleet size is almost 1,000 vehicles, but a lot of small LDVs with aerial platform cranes. And as part of their RTMS implementation, they did a strategy. They reduced their stock replacement cycle from 33 to 8 to 50 years. They did a functional alignment review, it started off at only 40%, they improved it to 85%. Their fleet availability improved from 65 to 92%, and service schedule attainment from 47 to 98%. So that's the kind of thing one would do when implementing a standard. The standard is to see where you are, identify gaps, and then set some policies or procedures and action plans to improve. So here you can see the monitoring of the service schedule attainment, fleet availability monitoring, and then on the right, average number of repairs and maintenance work orders per vehicle per year. You can see the improvement there. Also speeding, that's normally quite a challenge for operators to get speeding under control. But here you can see their monitoring. And monitoring of traffic violations and fleet incident rate. These are just examples of what a company is doing to monitor certain KPIs. So of significance is their fuel consumption over 9 years, reduced by 24%, probably mostly due to improved driver training. And then the second one, Danny, she's still outside probably, but she used to work for Dawn Logistics. They had 13 depots around the country, and she got all 13 depots certified over a period of a year. And this just shows some of the improvements that they measured from 2013 to 2017 in terms of a reduction in fines, reduction in crashes, significant reduction in crashes due to driver error, and then breakdowns. As I said, speeding is normally quite a challenge. Using a telematics with a definition for speeding events, they had 60,000 in 2014, that's of the fleet of 200 trucks, so about 300 speeding events per truck per year. And through improved management of speeding, in 2017 it was just less than 5,000 speeding events, which is 19 per truck per year. And that is an example of risk management. Because if you've got your trucks that are speeding on a very frequent basis, your risk of crashes, etc., is greatly increased. And they also measured a significant reduction in fuel consumption from 2013 to 2017, 23%, and they attributed that mainly to improved maintenance processes and improved driver behavior. So what I've tried to do is highlight the challenges out there. I think it's very serious for our country in terms of safety, but also in terms of transport efficiency. I think I've highlighted the high levels of non-compliance. The brake and tyre watch is only looking at brakes and tyres plus a few other things. License is expired and that. It doesn't focus on overloading, it obviously doesn't focus on speeding. So if you add all these things together, you can say that a large percentage of heavy vehicles on our road network are not compliant, and the impact of law enforcement is very small. So if you consider all the truck trips that are on the road today, probably not nearly 5% of them would be subject to some form of law enforcement. So we're trying to move that vertical line towards the right. So irrespective of law enforcement, improve compliance on the road, and at the same time reduce fatalities and reduce transport costs. So thank you, that's my sort of introductory presentation.